News!
Okay, we'll start with this. Oshaki Foster wants unification match against newly crowned WBA champion Jazza Dickens. Foster is ready to jump at another big-time opportunity in his next fight. Jazza Dickens, the junior lightweight division's WBA champion, lost out on the chance to defend his title against Hayato Tsutsumi due to his opponent's orbital bone fracture. Now that he's been officially removed from the December 27th Ring 4 card in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the 34-year-old has to figure out his next move.
I think that was a blessing in disguise, Hayato becoming injured, because I think Hayato was going to beat Jazza Dickens and take that title from Jazza so soon after having won it. That is, being elevated to it.
It's been obvious for months that Lamont Roach wasn't going to go back down to 130, so at some point he had to drop the title. When he did, Jazza picked it up.
Jazza was interim champion.
So Oshaki Foster, a champion at that same weight, has an idea. Let's make it happen. Foster wrote on his X account, and I'll come to Europe. The ring's #1 super featherweight and WBC champion is fresh off a lopsided win over two-weight world champion Stephen Fulton, who was going for 3. Initially, their matchup was considered too close to call. Foster, however, easily outboxed him from the outside. For the win, Foster was awarded the WBC interim lightweight title, a belt that was arbitrarily put on the line when Fulton arrived 2 pounds overweight. Still, even with the option to move up, Foster opted to vacate the interim belt and hold on to his own 130-pound title. Dickens, to his credit, isn't interested in holding on to his title and making easy defenses. Prior to Tsutsumi pulling out, Dickens, according to the odds, was a massive underdog. Against Foster, that figures to be the case again. Still, that won't stop Dickens from picking up the phone and attempting to make the fight happen. Let's talk. Dickens replied to Foster on his X account. What you have to appreciate about Jazza Dickens is he's being realistic about who he is and his abilities in spite of the alphabet title. There's a good chance that you could lose to one of these guys, so if you lose, make it worth something.
So maybe he can make some scratch in a unification match with Oshaki Foster. I think the biggest hindrance is I'm not sure who promotes Jazza Dickens at this time or Oshaki Foster. Up until recently, Oshaki was over there on the Top Rank side of things, but he was last in action on a PBC show, and I'm not sure that he's still with Top Rank, and even if he is,
they're on shaky ground. We still don't know who their broadcast partner is going to be in the coming calendar year. With one fight on schedule, the Zayas versus Baru fight, we still don't know how we're supposed to watch it. So even if Oshaki were still with Top Rank, that doesn't resolve the issue. Who's supposed to pay for this fight to put it together? Jazza Dickens has a belt, so does Oshaki. Both fighters presumably want to make something substantial for a unification match.
I don't know that Top Rank would kick it out. I don't even know that Oshaki is still with Top Rank, so that's the obstacle. Who promotes Jazza Dickens? Who promotes Oshaki Foster? Both fighters are willing to fight, but who's supposed to pay for it?
Now, my recommendation is that if Oshaki Foster is a network and promotional free agent, then he should probably go to Matchroom, as Matchroom does shows in both the United Kingdom and the United States. They're fully capable of making that fight happen. You say that you're willing to go to Europe for that fight, they can make it happen. They've made the Navarrete versus Sugar Munoz fight happen at that same weight. That unification match between those two champions, they might be interested in picking up another for the winner, assuming that their man is the winner.
Sugar Munoz.
That'd be my advice for Jazza or Oshaki in the event that neither of them are with a major promotional outfit. The two fighters are willing to fight, willing to unify with each other, so that's half the battle right there. The other half all boils down to who's gonna pay for it, because somebody has to.
In men's heavyweight news, Netflix unveils Anthony Joshua versus Jake Paul viewership numbers. Anthony's 6th round knockout over Jake Paul on Friday has the numbers to back it up. The fight, which streamed on Netflix from the Kaseya Center in Miami, drew an estimated average minute audience of 33 million live viewers globally from opening to closing bell, pay-per-video Amp and Netflix. According to a press release from MVP and Netflix, the co-main event, which was a unanimous decision win for unified super featherweight champion Alicia Baumgartner over Layla Boudoir, had an AMA of 15 million viewers. MVP also added that the fight between Joshua and Paul drew 1.2 billion impressions on Netflix's global social channels. Along with those impressions, the slow-motion clip of Joshua's devastating right hand that dropped Paul for a fourth and final time and broke his jaw in two places has 214 million impressions across Netflix's global social channels, making it the most viewed clip from a Netflix live event. The fight also trended #1 worldwide on X and was Netflix's most watched event on Friday in the United States and the United Kingdom, among other countries. According to MVP, Joshua vs. Paul set a record for the highest grossing boxing gate at the Kaseya Center.
Do you remember when I told you that Anthony Joshua is an international superstar and that boxing him in place of Gervonta Davis is actually bigger than the Gervonta Davis fight would have been, because Anthony brings an international audience to the table, not just an American one.
Anthony is known all over the United Kingdom, all over Europe, and parts of Africa, where there are only so many people who would have stayed up to the wee hours of the morning to see Jake and Gervonta. And so I believe this is the proof that the Joshua fight turned out to be bigger than the Gervonta Davis fight would have been. Paul managed to evade Joshua's offense for the first 4 rounds by moving around the 22 by 22 foot ring, but he began to tire in the 5th, where he was knocked down twice. Joshua scored one more knockdown in the 6th before he finally managed to corner Paul and break his jaw with one final right hand to end the fight. Paul's bout against Mike Tyson in November of last year drew an estimated AMA of 108 million global viewers and set a record for the most streamed sporting event ever, with 65 million concurrent streams. The co-main event, which was the rematch between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, that the former won by unanimous decision, was the most watched women's boxing match.
Most watched women's sporting event in U.S. history, drawing an estimated 74 million live viewers globally with an AMA of 47 million. Joshua vs. Paul was also slightly behind Terence Crawford's unanimous decision win over Canelo Alvarez to become the undisputed super middleweight champion on September 13th. Crawford vs. Canelo drew an AMA of 36.6 million throughout their fight. Still, 33 ain't nothing to sneeze at.
The ends have to justify the means, and for all the criticism that this event, this fight, whatever you want to call it, for all the critiquing that it got, people were paying attention, people were watching, and that is what it's all about. It's a numbers game.
The ends have to justify the means, and irrespective of what people are saying in the build-up of a fight, it only matters whether or not they actually watched it, and apparently they did.
While some people were critical of Anthony Joshua for even accepting this fight, and people have been critical of Jake Paul his entire boxing career, he managed to get those girls on that undercard more exposure than they would have got boxing on any other show. Carolyn,
Yocasta, Alicia have all benefited from Jake Paul's foray in the world of boxing.
And I've been saying it throughout that whether you like him or not, or his fights, Jake in his own way has managed to keep the sport of boxing in the public consciousness in a way that many other boxers do not, as Jake Paul is not your conventional boxer, your run-of-the-mill boxer. He's got his hands on the pulse of a much younger audience conventional boxers don't have access to and don't really appeal to. In his own way, he's helping the sport along and keeping it relevant. I know that sounds crazy, but who was it that brought Netflix to the table in the first place?
It wasn't the PBC. It wasn't Top Rank. It wasn't any conventional boxer that you and I could think of.
Netflix's endeavor in the world of boxing begins with Jake Paul and his fight against Mike Tyson, whether you like it or not, and that interest has not yet dissipated, as since then they've done 3 other
boxing cards. Taylor versus Serrano 3, Crawford versus Canelo, and of course, this past Friday's fight with Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua, to where down the line, if Netflix makes a more conscientious investment in the sport, a more regular one, Jake Paul would have had a hand in that. He would have helped that along, being the catalyst that brings Netflix to the table and keeps them there in his own way. I'm not telling you to like him or his fights, but you have to acknowledge,
Objectively, you have to admit that in some quarters, he's having a positive effect on the sport.
First things first, I do believe that the way in which you feel about this fight on the Monday after depends on how you felt about it going in. And what I mean by that is, if you were expecting Ali Frazier, if you were expecting Gotti Ward, if you were expecting Canelo Crawford, if you were expecting the best of the best, perhaps because you don't know much about boxing, or perhaps because you fell for whatever promotional tactics or anything like that, if you were expecting high-level boxing, a firefight akin to some of the great fights over the past couple decades, Leonard Duran, stuff like that, Hagler Hearns, if you were expecting that, you were obviously disappointed, because there was no way that this fight was going to live up to that. There was no way. Just given who was fighting, given the fact that Jake has, going into the fight, 13 fights on his resume, and Anthony is who he is, there was a massive discrepancy in terms of skill, size, height, weight, reach, resume, years in the game, everything. Everything was in Anthony's favor. So if you were expecting that kind of fight, you were obviously disappointed. The other group of people who are disappointed, so there's two groups. There's fans who maybe were, convinced that this was going to be something else. And then there's media who, for whatever reason, every time Jake Paul fights, feel like they have to virtue signal either to other promoters or to a community and fan base and say this was a sham, this was fixed, this was a black eye, this was the demise, this was the death, this was this, that, and the other. That's what they have to do.
I agree with all of that. I agree with everything Ariel Helwani said. You got people out there that want to get in a tizzy every time Jake Paul blows into a handkerchief.
And why? You're the one that's paying attention.
You're the one so concerned with what he's doing, constantly arguing about the sanctity of boxing, the state of boxing, when if push comes to shove, if he's doing something, you're watching it.
You don't have to.
Consider that Jake Paul, at the time he's boxing Anthony Joshua, had more boxing matches than Conor McGregor did when he boxed Floyd Mayweather.
I approached the Anthony Joshua versus Jake Paul fight with a lighthearted attitude, because it's not like Anthony was putting anything important on the back burner by fighting Jake. It's not like he was missing out on fighting someone that he should have been fighting by fighting Jake. And for Jake, he was giving people what they wanted for years now. They've wanted to see Jake in there with a formidable adversary, even though he's a novice.
So when he fights one, you're gonna complain? You're gonna get mad that he's doing it? Some people are never happy. So I didn't have a negative attitude towards this event, towards this fight. It was different than my demeanor towards the Gervonta Davis fight, because Gervonta Davis was using Jake in place of what else should be happening.
Yeah, it was different with him, because he should be fighting Shakur Stevenson. He should have fought Devin Haney. There's a laundry list of guys that Gervonta Davis should have fought, and he was using Jake as an alternative. Anthony wasn't. For Anthony, it was a side quest, an easy lick that doesn't impede his ability to do anything else. So I didn't have a negative attitude. In tandem with Jake having more boxing matches at the time he fights Anthony than Conor McGregor had at the time he fought Floyd Mayweather, that Jake had more experience in a boxing ring than Francis Ngannou did at the time he fought both Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. So I myself didn't have a negative attitude towards it.
Anyone that was okay with those boxing matches really shouldn't take issue with this one. And in the end, people got what they wanted. A lot of people wanted to see Jake Paul get knocked out, and he did. So why complain?
The question is, what happens now that people have got what they wanted, that Jake Paul has gotten his jaw broken in two places?
Listen, this happens. It's not common. Obviously, it's a very bad injury, but he, double fracture on both sides. You're going to lose teeth there too. And if you saw the X-rays of post-surgery, you saw the 2 plates on each side and the missing teeth because they have to take those out because of where the fractures are. Now, in terms of the healing process, first of all, those plates that they put on there, I have one on my hand here. It's basically a bridge, and the bone is allowed to grow and heal around that. That bone density needs to fill in first before they can put those teeth back in there, because you got to drill into a jaw while it's healing to put tooth implants. That's not a great idea. So you got to wait for that to heal and then recover before you put those teeth back in. Then you got to get your jaw strength back. He's going to be out of the ring for a while. And he even said, he was like, I need a rest. He's been busy. He has been busy. He's been putting on big shows, at least 2 fights a year, which isn't super busy in terms of an athlete. But for someone like him, who is coming up the way he's been coming up and the kind of shows he's put on, he's been very, very busy. So he's going to take some time off, but we'll see how that jaw comes together, because that's a catastrophic injury.
Well, that's what I've been saying. The prognosis for recovery for the kind of injury that Jake Paul just suffered is anywhere in between 3 to 6 months. And that's 3 to 6 months to heal, you understand. That doesn't even mean you'll be ready to fight by the end of that. I would not expect to see Jake Paul back in the boxing ring with anybody until maybe the very end of the second quarter of next year, or sometime in the third, at the earliest.
What you're looking at is the summer months, that Jake Paul may be out of commission for the foreseeable future until it gets hot outside again.
Though if what people wanted from Jake was for him to share the ring with someone closer to his own size, or maybe closer to his own age, or maybe a more formidable adversary than who he's been fighting, he satisfied that demand. He did that.
And a lot of people were watching when he did it.
So tell me that he's not drawing more attention to the sport of boxing than what are supposed to be some esteemed professionals and seasoned promoters, people who are supposed to have a lot more time in than Jake Paul does. Any business that is a business relies on the principle of supply and demand. Jake Paul actually met that demand.
Where a lot of people in this industry often ignore it. Ignoring what the fans want to see, what they're asking for, to protect their own best interests.
Now, I would not give Jake Paul the same credit that I would give a warrior and a guy who went out there and laid it all on the line, because I don't think he ever actually tried to win this fight, but I will give him credit for being a daredevil, a stuntman, a maverick.
Because it still takes guts to do that.
And he's taken his lumps. I think people look at the amounts of money that Jake Paul rakes in for a fight, and they get jealous. They get angry that if he were doing the exact same thing on a smaller scale, they wouldn't care. But because he's been so successful, making so much, they want to go clutching at their pearls and worrying about the sanctity of boxing.
Spare me.
I think Jake Paul earned his money this past Friday. I think for Netflix, he was worth every penny, every dollar he delivered. Whether you like him or not, Jake Paul draws attention.
And whether you like him or not, he went in there on Friday with an Olympic gold medalist and a 2-time unified heavyweight champion. What accents Jake Paul's commitment towards entertaining a crowd, if not that? He was in over his head, and everybody knew it, but he did it anyway.
To the point where people thought that it was fixed, thought that it was rigged, thought it wasn't real. That broken jaw looks real enough.
I give him his credit. He's a fantastic promoter, a fantastic salesman, even if he's not a fantastic boxer.